Hey everyone, it's MGTOW Dad. I'm having a pretty rough time and came across this video, and in light of a certain couple things that have happened, I thought it was important, at least for me, to get this out there. So I'm going to go through a video talking about Asperger's and describe some of my conditions within and the things I do or what's going on in my head when he goes through and talks about certain things. And it's important for me to get this out. I talk a lot about externalizing, but it's also important for if you have to deal with someone who has Asperger's. May not be obviously the Bible of, conditions, but just things to look for. I consider myself articulate, aware, and I reflect. So I reflect a lot and try to take things into account, and a lot of that will come into play with this video, and you'll understand. So, thank you, and please, if you have any comments before, during, or after, let me know below. I'd love to know your thoughts. So, this was an amazing video, and I had to pause it and rewatch it several times because, as you're going to hear when I start talking about certain things, my mind just explodes. And what you're with all this, I'm starting to realize that I've been for years misunderstood. And I don't blame anyone but myself for that. What bothers me is the things I'm aware of and the things I think I'm doing successfully never seem to work or be noticed. So without blabbering on anymore, I'm going to stop this, set up, and we're going to watch what is Asperger's syndrome. And here we go.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sheldon Horowitz here at the National Center for Learning Disabilities. Welcome to the next in our Ask the Expert series. Today what I'd like to do is talk about Asperger's syndrome. Asperger's syndrome is not a learning disability, and it has features of autism spectrum disorder, nonverbal learning disabilities, and ADHD. So let's talk about Asperger's syndrome in the context of the domains within which some of those characteristics occur. Let's begin with social interaction, and then move to language, and then move to other. In the social interaction domain, individuals with Asperger's syndrome tend to have limited and sometimes inappropriate kinds of behaviors in the social interaction domain. They have difficulties with nonverbal communication. So for example, they have a hard time reading gestures or facial expressions, and sometimes their gestures and facial expressions don't communicate what it is that they're thinking and feeling.
For me, it's more the latter of the two, where he talks about not recognize others, my inability for my facial expressions and mannerisms to portray what I'm actually saying or feeling. I get told very often by people I love and I'm talking with about things I wish we could keep talking about, that stop being so angry, what are you upset about? And I find myself saying over and over to people, my kids also a lot, but adults that listen to my words, just listen to my words. Because someone will say, wow, you're don't get so upset. And in my head, I'm making relatively the same face I am now, the same features. I'm excited to be expressing myself, especially when I actually feel like what I'm saying, at least from my mind to my mouth, not so much to the ears of others, is making sense. And I enjoy that. And people always then tell, again, calm down. Why are you, all these things? And then I get to that, well, I'm not angry, upset. I'm enjoying this. And again, it's not interpreted that way. I don't, that's just, again, this is something I'm learning as I'm just made. I always say I can fill a library with what I don't know. I know I'm not smart. I try to compensate for my inability to be smart by being self aware and reflecting, by listening to others if they say something. I'm a skeptic. I'm a skeptic of myself more than ever, more than anything. If someone says, Steve, you're a bad father, I'll consider it. Even if I bristle, I'm mad. I'm like, how could they think that? For I always say context is king. Before my third daughter was born, my middle daughter had this moment where she said to me, Daddy, I don't think you love me. And she is a very independent girl, and I love it. So independent that sometimes, as a father, I mistook giving her distance and for what she interpreted, not misinterpreted, she interpreted as me not caring or loving like I do with at that point my oldest. And I got mad and upset at first in my head and then thought, like I'm kind of alluding to now, what am I doing wrong? That's I know in my heart and my head that if it's silly for any person, especially my daughter, not to think I love her. So, what am I doing wrong? If I'm saying it in this manner or displaying it in this manner and she's interpreting it differently, I need to do it in a way that she interprets. I'm not smart enough to always do that initially, but I'm aware enough now that I know that to do those kinds of things. I don't know how I got here from facial expressions, so let's go back.
Feeling. They often have difficulties understanding emotional cues, so they miscue.
Specific examples. My mother was. My mom passed away of cancer several years ago. She. I love my mom, and I spent as much time as I always could with my mom. So I don't have regrets after my mother passed away. And I think a lot of people mistook that as me not caring, maybe because I didn't express it correctly. For example, I remember I had a relative call, and this was in the tail end of things. Now, my mom had smoked. My mom passed away in her early 60s and had smoked the overwhelming majority of her life. I'm not smart, but I understand how lung cancer works. I love my mom, and I wish with all of my heart she was here today. But I understand what smoking for 50 years does to you, and understand that sometimes, while you can hope or pray or think or want or wish, you also have to understand reality around those hopes. I have had people die before, and I do believe for a lot of people it was a first significant death, and my mom was young and it was early. So where I'm getting at is this person called and was basically saying, your mom's not in good shape. You should really, think about, doing all these things. And to me, they're things I've done. And I said to this person, well, thank you, and I know what's going on. Let me know if you need anything. I have at the time I was going to school full time in the middle of my divorce, but I would still offer those things. Let me know if there's anything I can do. I'll try to, be there if I can. I'll try to do whatever I can. And in hindsight, I think what that person was expecting and why they were upset at me is because I didn't have an outward emotional reaction. Like the overwhelming majority of people who was, if you told, hey, um, Steve's mom is probably going to go in the next couple days. Most people, it elicits an emotional reaction. I don't mind emotional reactions. I try not to elicit them in others. So I know if I would have gotten emotional at that point, additionally, it probably would have made her emotional. But the point was, nothing of that was a surprise, and I didn't have those regrets. And again, I just, I don't know. But that's my point is these emotional cues I don't understand. I say to myself, I don't understand why people are, getting angry there. I always say, you hear people talking and they're talking about two different conversations because they don't dictate the terms. So, and all these things, but I misinterpret them in others. Now, upon reflection, I don't know, again, if my emotional cues towards others are skewed. This is something that I don't think most people have the fortitude to go ahead and assess these things in others, even if they ask, because I'm very open to hearing these things. I'm going to go real quick right on to eye contact. This is an interesting one for me. I do have, as you can see, aversion to eye contact, but I also do it when I'm thinking. However, my point is, I was in the Marine Corps. Eye contact was not a option. It wasn't an option. So I know a lot of people who say me coming out of the Marines was a different person, and this interests me in so many ways because, again, I have issues with autism, my brain, with Asperger's, but I know you can navigate these things. I know I can. And again, I'm not that smart. I'm just self aware. Eye contact was a big thing. Now I generally have an issue doing it, and I'm going to try to not do it here, but I can feel I'm dropping when I talk about asking for charity. Like I kind of mentioned, it took my ex a long time to get me just to, if we were going out taking the family to a restaurant, to ask for a veteran discount, and then to reapply when my back and all that started getting worse, to reapply to get to 100% disability because originally I wasn't, I'm thinking discharged at 100%. But I just didn't, I have issues with that. Anyway, so the eye contact is a very interesting thing to me where I know I have had lots of issues with it. I can remember being that just timid, scared little boy unable to do it. And people who, again, who didn't know I was in the Marines are kind of stunned at the difference sometimes. I remember one guy who was a real big jerk was actually kind of insulting, trying to compliment me about that, about the difference between the person I was and the person, or I should say the person I was going into the Marines and the person coming out. So there's hope.
When listening to someone or watching somebody, they may then say something inappropriate, or they may repeat something that isn't appropriate to the situation because they're misreading the social aspect of the situation or the emotional aspect of the situation. Individuals with Asperger's are often seen to have low eye contact, either not making good eye contact or sustaining good eye contact. And in this social interaction domain, those with Asperger's tend also to be at risk for not having many friends. They tend to be socially isolated.
I love but hate that term socially isolated. I suffer very gracefully, but I am suffering because you may hear by the way I talk, I'm social. But because of what you've heard so far and everything you're about to hear, I am completely isolated. When I need help, be it from a veteran organization, from other veterans, from police, from family and friends, from people I've given money to, time to, support to, people I've let live in my house, people I've let take my vehicles. They're all gone, and it's my fault. Like I say, uh, it's just whatever. It's I suffer gracefully.
In the language area, those with Asperger's often are extremely verbal, highly verbal, and their language can be very sophisticated at times.
Yesterday or the other day, I had someone I was talking to essentially say that I'm trying to paraphrase but not remove the context, saying I just talk too much and people stop listening. It's exhausting to listen to me talk. And that's not insulting on a personal level from her, but as much as people think I'm not listening, I go to great lengths to listen. That is, and I don't. And now I'm talking about right now, where I'm, like I mentioned, aware of issues I do have listening or with what I'm going to call hyperfocus, and I'll talk about later. But I go to great lengths to listen. I ask people, what do you mean when you said that, what did you, because I thought it sounded you like you were angry, were you, or that's an example, or what, well, when you said that that wasn't right, what do you think is right? Well, why were you offended? Now, I'll even say this to people. Like, I don't understand. Like, why were you offended? Because I'm just thinking in my head, like, if that happened to me, I wouldn't be offended. But, and then I'll tell them, but, I was in the Marines, so maybe cussing at me doesn't bother because, we got cussed at on a daily basis, but you getting cussed at the store for, is different. I listen and again, so maybe that's too much. I don't know. I don't know. But in my head, it's like, I always get accused of I have had people I love tell me I talk to them too much and I don't listen to them. I could tell you stories that people have told me about going on vacation, and specifically people who tell me I don't listen to them, about what they've done with their kids, their husbands, the problems they've had with their in-laws, them going to church, them dealing with vacations. Again, I'm trying to avoid certain specifics, not to talk about people, but things with animals that they own. The same people who tell me I don't listen. I don't. You'll hear me say a lot. I don't understand things. I don't understand that. I can't. Part part of the conversation was with my brother, who when he called and he asked if I was busy, I said, "Yeah, I'm in the middle of dinner, but I have you on speakerphone so I can hear you as long as you don't mind being on speakerphone. We can talk. I know some people don't like being on speakerphone. It really annoys them, but what's going on? What's up?" And the conversation becomes, well, if you don't want to talk, I'll let you go. And those words not only never came out of my mouth, but I said, no, I want to talk right now. I'm good. I'm just letting you know I am in the middle of making dinner and you're on speakerphone because I have the kids. He ends up not hanging up on me, but hanging up with me because I don't even, again, I tried to say in the conversation one more time, like, no, I'm not trying to get off the phone. If you don't want to talk, then don't, but I'm as good now as I'm going to be at any time. I have the kids. And that was the end of the conversation. Again, people here, they don't listen to the words. I didn't just say, are you busy? Yeah. Yup. But that was the conversation that my brother heard.
What they do when they're talking is that they tend to discuss themselves and their
And I
interests
do
and not
this.
focus on the interests of others. It can be a one-sided conversation, and some of that reciprocity, the flow, the reciprocal flow between one person and another can be awkward.
Reciprocal flow is amazing because I can almost see conversations as like a curve. But I was talking to someone today. I was talking about my arrest, about all the appointments I have to make with the VA, the treatment I'm getting. Then we go on to conversations about other things. And the person says to me, like, you spent the whole first time talking, and now that I'm talking, basically saying that the conversation has not been equal and there has been something wrong with that. But in my mind, the premise of every conversation differs, whereas I may have a conversation with you that I have zero. I may call you just to ask how your day has been. So if I'm asking how your day has been, and that's what I want to talk to you about, in my head, that conversation would naturally be about 80% you, 20% me. And because, again, I am in what I consider an active listener, when you ask, I may say, oh, okay, I understand that, or I don't understand that. Can you explain what did you mean? Or, oh, I had a similar situation like that. Okay, so that makes sense. Or I've seen a news article that talked about that. Okay, something, and then ask them a question or prompt them further. But it seems like people demand equity in conversations, that they have to be equal, where, like I say, conversations have a flow that is not always reciprocal to me. So if you call me and you're like, hey, Steve-O, tell me about your children, why should that conversation be dictated by you? Why should it be, I don't want to use the term dominated, but for the lack of better terms in the moment, dominated by you if I'm the one explaining to you about my kids? And people almost take offense at my ability to be candid and open. I don't get it. It makes me, I always say, I walk away from a conversation, I'm like, man, I probably should not have said most of that, because they probably misunderstood everything or misinterpreted everything, and I don't know.
They tend to be literal in the ways that they understand language. So, for example, if I was with somebody with Asperger syndrome and I was to say, get out of here, they may think that it means that I want them to get up and physically move away, as opposed to, get out of here. That's just so terrific. I can't believe that just happened.
My main issue with this is texts. And it's why it's not that I'm not a fan of text messages. It seems like, as you may notice, I get misinterpreted a lot. I have a philosophy where if you say something to me and it is upsetting or rude or something, I always try to, or non-responsive, something negative, or I interpret the response negative. I always try to ask myself, like, how could I be misconstruing this? Let's assume that person meant this in the best way. How can I take that wrong? And then I may say, what did you mean by that? Because I don't understand, or, what did that, I don't understand the question. Can you ask that again? In chats, texts, all that, whatever. I'll say text-based mediums. I don't get contexts. I don't understand emojis like people do. And that's really bothersome for me right now, because everything is getting pushed online. I would rather be able to ask a person the question than resort online, because everything is facts and links, and then I have to call someone anyway. It's very frustrating to me, my inability again, to understand context, situations, and things like that within text-based medium, I often have to preface things with, I'm not trying to be rude, or I hope you don't take this the wrong way because I'm not angry, but why did you say that? Or it's just that's off the top of my head something. I try to address it, but let's move on.
So there's this literal component to the way they understand language, and that tends to be very difficult for many individuals with Asperger's. The ways that they use their voice, both the tone of their voice, the pitch of their voice when they're speaking, and the way that they modulate the volume of their voice.
And I get told a lot, you're being loud, you seem angry, why are you upset? Why are you upset?
Can be problematic. But as mentioned before, those with Asperger's tend to be very sophisticated in terms of the language that they use, the vocabulary and language. When we think about Asperger's syndrome, I listed other, but can almost think of them as quirks, quirky kinds of behaviors. In the same way that individuals on the autism spectrum disorder are fascinated and focused on pieces or things, in an expanded kind of a way, those with Asperger's tend to focus on, or many have particular interests in unusual objects or topics. So they may memorize the map of a subway system, or they may be fascinated by the specifics of what constitutes the decorative ironwork on bridges. They focus on those kinds of peculiarities and they run with them and they become quite expert at them.
I love understanding how and why things work, and I'll use the example of, so ironically, I'm fascinated by language and communication because I am a hot person. I'm always hot. I love the windows open. I have my windows open now and the heat's down to about 69. I always think it's hot, and my kids always think it's cold, so I mediate by raising the heat. No one in that situation is wrong. Perspective, experiences mean so much. So I want to understand why I could say why you could have two people present, maybe twins have the same life paths and end up in different places. Why someone can say something to someone and have it interpreted one way, have someone say it verbatim the same way but interpreted differently. Why can some people reach millions of people, and why can some people be detested for saying that same message? Why are I love that. And then for a less verbal, I used to play Magic the Gathering. Man, I used to play Magic the Gathering, but had to quit. But I loved the mechanics of the game, learning because it's a trading card game and cards interact with each other, and then there's orders and phases and all these different things. And I love not only learning them, but then learning how to break and exploit them and do the things that, oh man, I never thought about that. But you have to know how things work in order to not, break them, exploit them, or simply know how they work to be able to fully utilize them. I love that. Going on while I take a drink.
They exhibit often awkward body language, their posture and their movement. They don't often know what they do with their hands. They stand in a funny kind of a way. They may have posture difficulties or present differently in social situations that are awkward.
I don't think I have issues with that, but I believe that's one thing that would have been stamped out of me by Drill Instructor Staff Sergeant Cedeno, Drill Instructor Staff Sergeant Huell, and Senior Drill Instructor Staff Sergeant Owens.
Individuals with Asperger's are also at times bothered by noise or by lights or by certain textures or intense kinds of tastes. They tend to have difficulties often in areas of motor coordination. So
I'm going to stop because I think they're going into sports. The bothered by things, I call it hyperfocus or an inability to multitask. Because I mentioned I like understanding how things work. I always want to immerse and focus on what I'm doing. If I'm with my kids or if I'm learning a manual, I want to focus on that. It's why you'll hear me say often, when I have my kids, nothing else matters. Anything that I give to you all takes away from my kids. And that's just the way that I look at my life. I I just have a lot of trouble with that. I get very frustrated. Later they'll talk about routines because I develop impromptu routines when I'm into something. Once I start to make an order of the best way to start engaging with it, I start to have routines. Audit and I do have, again, when I will watch a movie or video, I'll, depending on the context of it or the depth or involvement of it, I'll often watch it 2 or 3 times because one time I'll watch it for the visuals, one time I'll watch it listening to the dialogue, then I'll watch it as what I call a complete experience. Like, oh, okay, so now that scene with what they were saying, it makes sense because I can't always focus on all of it. Sometimes, again, and it's not always because some movies are made really, literally to focus. It's something I find interesting about, for example, Japanese movies versus American movies. They have a lot more pauses where the point is not everything. The point is literally that one thing, and it's trying to drive it home by just letting you see it for 30 seconds. Just the man staring at something and the grief on his face or the happiness on his face. That guy's just happy and you get it. Okay, man. I want to smile like that guy who just, sees his child born and it just has him smiling, or who just, won the lottery. I don't know, whatever. Like, but sometimes I can't do that. Music is something similar with that. I will often have to stop and either, if I have music on the background, if a song I love comes on, I will either have to stop what I'm doing and pay attention to the song or go change the song or turn off the music because it starts, now I'm like, okay, I'm getting distracted. Moving on.
Sports can be an area of difficulty. Many individuals with autism do really well in individual sports and not so well in team sports. And they tend sometimes to have difficulties, not just with the coordination or the rules or the following of the interactive nature of sports, but also with balance and muscle control.
This one is very interesting to me. Now, I'm going to say something that I know is true. I am ambidextrous. I can do a lot of things good with both hands, semi-good with both hands, but I'm left eye dominant, but right hand dominant. So I'm a mess. And what I'm getting at is certain things like, so I can shoot a bow left and right-handed, pistols both. I can throw right-handed and kind of ish left. I can catch with both. I can write predominantly left-handed, but I can write with both hands at the same time, but not equally as good with the right. So I tend to do one-handed tasks left-handed, two-handed tasks right-handed. I have a lot of trouble shooting because when I shoot, I want to shoot right-handed. I do shoot a rifle, for example, but I can't wink. I can't. Again, this is the stuff that's funny and quirky about. He mentioned it was quirky. I can't wink. I can smush both and hold like barely enough. So again, I can't literally see out of the other eye. So I can't wink. So I have to literally, I've had to train myself to focus out of my left eye when I'm firing, even though I'm right eye dominant in every other aspect of my life. That has been just a menace to my life. This is bad, but good. This just came to me. I'm left-handed. Tying shoelaces and stuff like that. Tying is different if you're left-handed. I remember, sadly, my mom tried to get my dad to teach me how to do fishing stuff because we were very estranged. And still are, sadly. He was trying to teach me how to tie fishing lines through the hook. And he was frustrated and ended up blowing up, and we didn't do it because I couldn't understand the right-handed way to tie it. Yeah.
Individuals with Asperger syndrome will struggle often with routines or changes in routines. They have difficulties in transition periods, moving from one activity to another, and they are known often to have.
I want to talk about this. In regards to my divorce, I'm going to try to be very brief. I'm a MGTOW. I would never go back to anything I was. But I ironically or paradoxically did not want my divorce. Not until it was done. And a lot of it had to do with my kids. But I would then talk to people who I loved. You'll hear me say that again. I want to focus. People I loved, people who I thought were my family because I told them they were like family to me and I loved them like family. One day, because my ex decided something, my routine was shook up because they no longer loved me, no longer wanted to talk to me, no longer cared that I cared about them and want to know. Still to this day, so many people I love are gone because of things that I never did to them. That doesn't make sense to me. I've had someone that I loved, an Army veteran, come live with me with his daughter. I originally did not want to charge him rent. He made me take rent from him. He lived with me for a few years. He was actually, I mentioned, what got me back into magic. That's the irony of talking about it. I loved him. I love him. And I love his daughter. He moved out, and I helped him move out of my house into his house, and I blew my back out moving a couch up his stairs. And I left. Several days later, weeks, whatever, my next message to him was, my daughter's having a birthday party. I hope you guys, can come. Here's the date and time. Something like that, I invited the next message was me inviting him to a birthday party. The message I get back is, I don't associate with racists. That doesn't make sense to me. I didn't do anything to him. This is with everything going on. I'm having anxiety attacks. And I'm messaging people, and I was hoping to get a message from someone for some specific information. And I'm about to fall asleep, and my phone vibrates, and my anxiety already spikes. And I'm like, all right, it's not a big deal. It's someone who hasn't talked to me in a year and a half. I'm going to read this. A year and a half since my last text. I am currently going through a divorce, not by my choice, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm sorry I didn't understand what you were going through when it was happening. I'm sorry that after a while, I started to despise you and what you had become and stopped talking to you, rather than keep talking to, listening to you, and being there for you. Anyway, hope you're well. I'm torn because I'm going to reach out to her positively. I never did anything to her, but she just told me she despised me. I never knew that. I went through talking to her because I loved her and I cared about her, and she despised me, and I'm so I don't know. I had again another person directly tell me, after I'm trying to get them, the conversation was brought up because I asked how they were doing, how everything's going, and the conversation leads to her telling me, you ask questions like that to something like to as like a check in the box, not because you care. someone I've known over 20 years says that to me, and I'm like, people I loved, I cared about, they talk to me about their family, their husband's occupation, the kids, the balance between the dynamic of their mother and father. It's all these things that I know and I listen to because I ask and talk about them, and then someone will tell me you don't care. You just you're interacting with me not because you're asking me how I am, not because you care, but so you can tell people that you asked I care, that you asked. That didn't I and I get again, that's this routine. These things I don't get. I don't get.
Difficulties with the physical act of writing, the handwriting process.
My handwriting is phenomenal, by the way. It's amazing. People often say I write like a girl, which I didn't know. I guess there. I have a question about that. This is very peculiar now. I noticed my mom, aunts, and all them have the same handwriting, and now that I remember, they had their handwriting charts. I remember my mom said she was left-handed, and they did to tie the thing behind the back and taught her to do right. I've never seen males. Do males from that generation, did they do the same thing? I'm just curious now. I got to look into that. I did mention earlier I wanted to. So I mentioned I'm ambidextrous and all that blah blah. I wanted to tie this in. I'm glad I talked about it because I forgot. This is one interesting thing about me. My mom and I think my brother say I used to do everything right-handed, and then I think they said between 6 and 8 started switching and doing everything left-handed. I don't know. I don't remember.
The motor control needed to do written expression. Those with Asperger syndrome are almost always of at least average intelligence, and
Average
they can
IQ,
certainly
baby.
demonstrate characteristics of giftedness. As I mentioned earlier, Asperger's often manifests itself in features of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Anxiety becomes an issue at certain points with individuals with Asperger's, as does depression, and that needs to be looked at carefully and monitored carefully.
I do have issues with depression, but I would never say I'm a depressed person. Even in all this, I make it a point to tell everybody, on my worst day, I am more happy than you are. Every day, like right now, I'm not going to see my daughters tomorrow. So I look at life through the lens of two things. I either wake up and, man, I am so happy I get to see my daughters today, or man, I woke up today and I'm one day closer to waking up with my daughters again. I'm expressive. Whether I'm positive like I am now, it comes out probably rather boisterous. When I'm probably talking about the negative, it probably comes out sounding depressed. I'm not depressed. I'm exceptionally happy. This is not about expressing positivity necessarily, so I hope that makes for some context, and this is almost done.
They may have some savant-like qualities, as
Nope.
might those in the autism spectrum
Not me, I'm
disorder
saying.
category. And as mentioned earlier, they may also be referred to at times as high-functioning autistics. For more information about...
I'm going to play this after I'm done to let you hear the remainder of it, but I do want to say, not that I feel very pretentious or judgmental saying this, so I'm just saying this within the confines of putting clarity to words. I do consider myself a high-ish functioning autist. If you have any questions, I maybe should have said this at the beginning, but if you've made it this far, by golly, please let me know if you made it this far. Timestamp this, because I want to give you a hug. Oh, I forgot what I was totally saying. and that's the point. Oh yeah, irony, right? If you have questions, specifics, broad, if you'd like to reach out, I'll put my email below. If you don't want to talk publicly about it, if you have private questions, that's something I often say you view the world through the lens of your own bias, which requires awareness. I am not very private, which is ironic because I'm probably the most alone or socially isolated and antisocial person But I don't know. I'm going off on tangents here. I am gonna go. Thank you for being here. I hope you learned something. Yeah, but that was my point. You view the world through the lens of your own bias. You need to be self-aware. I'm not private, and I don't mind sharing this. I know that's not the case with everybody, and if that's your case, good for you. Do what you need to do for you, as long as you're doing it for the betterment of yourself. If you have any questions, have at me. I'm gonna have to edit some stuff out of this. Cheers.